Hello, I'm Erika Bezzo, Executive Coach and Cross-Cultural Trainer. Welcome to the fourth interview in the Cross-Cultural Leadership for Women series. If you missed the previous three, you can see them on my blog, changeexperience.com. Today, I am with Marta Simonetti, Italian, CEO of Globalfield Ltd, specialized in green finance. Thank you, Marta, for accepting my invitation.
Thank you so much, Erika, and good evening, everyone.
Marta, let me use you briefly, and I will use my notes for that. Mm-hmm. So, you are Italian from Perugia, where you lived until the age of 19, and you studied modern languages and politics at the University of Westminster. During the university, you did an Erasmus, so a six-month period in Germany, in Leipzig, and 5 months in Brussels. You finished then your studies with a Master of Political Science at the London School of Business. And already during your studies, you started a collaboration with the EBRD, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. And in 2001, you joined the full-time staff there, where you remained till 2017, reaching the position of Deputy Pillar Head Multilateral Funds, position where you were managing European funds for climate change. And in the meanwhile, you got married, and your husband is German. You had two children that are now 9 and 13. And then due to an international assignment of your husband, you moved to South Korea with the whole family. And you lived there for 18 months. That's where you started your consulting activity, which that led you to set up your own company, Globalfield Ltd, a consultancy and advisory firm which specializes in green finance, sustainable development, and transformational leadership for climate action. I hope I correctly summarized your experience. And of all these international experiences, then, what was the greatest cultural barrier for you?
Yeah, thank you so much. And indeed, great introduction. Thank you so much. I would say that the greatest challenge has definitely been Korea. South Korea was so very different from any other place I had been before. Living there was a big challenge in terms of language barrier. I felt very quickly that I wasn't able to read, as a grown-up. I wasn't able to write, so I really felt illiterate. And there was also a lot of pollution, quite a lot of stress. We were living outside Seoul, which is a mega city, so moving around was taking a long time. It was challenging. I thought that also the weather was, we talk about the weather all the time here in London and in the UK, but actually we were going through very consistent and significant differences. So the winters were very, very, very cold. The summers were very, very, very hot. And in between autumn and spring were actually what in Korea they consider the high pollution or high dust seasons, which was quite difficult, quite challenging. Yes, so I would say that.
It was hard, and I can understand, I can imagine for you who has always fought for sustainable development and green solutions, it was particularly destabilizing living in a polluted country where the environmental condition is a little critical. But today, what would you do differently to better adapt to the country?
I think that what I would do differently would be to take things not so seriously, not so personally. I felt indeed that I couldn't bring a solutions to all those problems, but ultimately it's not that you can you can do your best towards contributing to some of the solutions, but you cannot take upon the responsibility of yourself for everything to be perfect. And I think that that is the way perhaps I approached it, which made it a lot more difficult for me. So I would take it a lot more easily, for sure. And go out more. I didn't do that enough.
And working for EBRD, you have traveled extensively in countries that are culturally very distant from ours, such as Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, Central Asia, Africa. Is there an episode or a situation that took you by surprise?
Yes, I can give you a recent example. I think it was about 2 years ago. Less than 2 years, I went to do a business trip in Sudan. I was in Khartoum, fascinating place. And of course I had meetings and we had to go places. And in the end, I had to go to the airport. All the time, things were taking such a long time. And the time was very flexible, very fluid. And I was always getting a little bit stressed out, like, oh, we have a meeting at 2 and at 3, we need to be here. And there is dinner, 10 o'clock, we were still kind of like eating. And everyone was saying, Marta, TIA, for 2-3 days, TIA. And at the end, I was like, what's this TIA? And they were saying, well, this is Africa. You cannot expect, like everything to be in a certain way, just be more relaxed. And I think this was, for me, really, really important because also linking to what I was saying before about South Korea, there are certain things that you cannot control. Ultimately, they make a certain experience so much more significant because it's normal, it's natural. In so many other countries, there is something which is so peculiar to them that makes it different for sure, but very valuable as a cultural experience, and here specifically as a professional experience as well.
Indeed, and there are cultures like ours and Western ones in general that consider time as a scarce resource, and other countries, other cultures, including African ones, that consider time as an abundant resource, which can effectively be very frustrating for us as Westerners now. What cultures have tested you in terms of flexibility apart from Sudan?
Yeah, I have spent a lot of time in Indonesia, many times over the past 9 years, really with the exception of last year because of the COVID situation. And I traveled there both professionally as well as for personal reasons. It's a place I absolutely love. And indeed, sometimes at a first approach, it might feel that the situations are very difficult, things take a long time, or you want to do something and people say, yes, of course, but actually things don't happen. And I feel that there is a way in which, probably especially as a foreigner, they want to please you, they don't want to upset you. So they do say things that you think that they want you to hear, but obviously sometimes, often things did not happen. And, I thought about this situation quite a bit, how do you approach it? And actually, ultimately, it's a very different way. It's not like a negative situation, but a very different way in which they create a much warmer experience for yourself, for others, for the tourists, for the foreigners, for the business people, because it's not just about the transaction, doing this and that's it. It is about cultivating the relationship. So ultimately, and it took me a long time to discover it, it creates that flexibility, creates that beauty in the culture that is so much more inclusive, because you include the time, you include the relationship, you include so much more space for getting to know each other, whether that is for personal reasons, professional reasons alike.
Absolutely. And then there are also cultures like the Indonesian one in which saying no is simply rude. So it's considered rude. And they always say yes, even if they can't do it or they have not the means to accomplish, but they say yes anyway. And even if the yes is a no, but we can't understand it because we are not used to such an indirect communication. No? So it is like a code, like an unwritten code. So that's really interesting. And what about UK? Was it easy for you to adapt there as Italian?
I think that coming to the UK, to London, was probably very easy because I came here early enough not to care about problems or issues. I started traveling abroad between the UK and Ireland since I was 16. So for me, when I then moved permanently to London, which was, well, I visited at 17, 18, 19, and then when I was 19, I moved here. Nothing came as a surprise. Sometimes, of course, my English wasn't great and I couldn't understand in particular. Or people would say, oh, I don't understand you, what you're trying to say. But I didn't care. I really, really liked the place and I still do. When I came in the 90s, it was really the land of possibilities. It was very open and it was becoming more and more open. Of course, there was the EU and the EU integration, but also a very strong globalization trends in finance, in the culture. One maybe anecdote that I say is that when I came, actually the coffees like cappuccinos were not nice at all. In the years, actually now you get some cappuccinos that are as good as what you get in Italy, in some places.
Okay, good. And so we can say that your determination was stronger than any hint of criticism around you somehow. Has anything changed with Brexit or COVID for you?
Yes, I would say so. Many of my friends have left. Some left before COVID or before Brexit, even for many reasons. We converge sometimes with many cultural groups, and people may go back, or people find their work elsewhere. So I have many friends who have moved to the States, friends in Hong Kong, in Singapore, people who went back to Australia, in Korea, etc., etc. So there is a very small group of hardcores who have remained in London. So I would say that, yes, things have changed. And especially now with COVID, some of my foreign friends, like non-British friends, I would say, haven't come back. They haven't come back because with the school still closed, they didn't feel the need to be back here. Also now working from home has become so much more routine and accepted and natural, of course, because of, again, the restrictions. They're still abroad. I hope they come back soon and to restart a little bit more of a normal life experience. But all in all, I would say that it feels a little bit more lonely at the moment.
And how do you cope with this feeling of isolation or loneliness?
Yeah, at the moment, apart from work, which is quite a bit of it, and children, because they're also at home, I do a lot of sports. I'm very sporty. I do yoga, I run. I do some weight training as well. I used to box. I was doing some boxing before today, just to rediscover, the training. But I would say that probably running is what makes me happy and, let's say, sane, quote unquote. And I say this because, like a moving meditation, I go out with 10 problems, I come back with 10 solutions, maybe even 20 solutions. because it's really a way in which the mind gets cleaned up of problems. Everything becomes so much easier. I can see the bigger picture so much more clearly. Of course, at the moment, the children are home, the schools are still closed, and we spend quite a lot of time together. Sometimes it's challenging, but at the same time, I wanted to say that we have done so many activities, baking, cooking, designing, destroying even things. But before, I used to complain all the time. Oh, I got so much work, or I'm traveling so much, I don't have enough time for the children. Now we do, and actually it's been quite nice.
Nice. I feel, while listening to you, I feel that it is important for you to consider the person as a whole. So as a manager and as a mother, where do you think it is easier to find a proper work-life balance? Is it in UK or in Italy? Where is it easier?
I would say for me that being in the UK is probably easier, and it's easier to also cope with the pressures of work-life balance. But let me perhaps answer a little bit more by saying that I don't have so much experience of Italy as a mother or as a working person, because now we go to Italy on holidays, so it's a little easier perhaps to go there, and you don't have to do, you're not, like within the context of, working and or, childcare or dealing with the schools. So here in the UK, I found that actually the legislation for example, maternity leave, statutory rights, is very, very good. Now, I know that there are issues of application. Sometimes it depends on the employer, even within the same organization, like when I was at the bank, at the EBRD, I would say that I had pretty much a very good situation. I had flexibility, and I was able to take time when I had the children for maternity leave. So that was not the issue. I did feel peer pressure, so the pressure that I needed to be at work, because otherwise perhaps other people would have done my job, and I felt that I needed to be back to do certain things or to take certain decisions. But overall, it's a situation of advantage. If I compare it, for example, with maternity leave, the length of breaks that people in the United States would take, or in Asia, where maternity leave, paternity leave are actually very rare, or they are very short. So I would say that here I have considered myself lucky enough.
Well, it's interesting because I was in Germany when my first daughter was born, and I remember feeling exactly the same. I also try to minimize my absence from work, and I think that's a feeling many women in different parts of the world can identify with. During your period, your time at EBRD, in the managing position, how did you experience the hierarchical relationship within the company?
Yeah. Yes, the EBRD is hierarchical. I would say many large organizations, corporations, would probably have a similar structure. I have encountered the same structure in other organizations I've worked with. For me specifically, it's quite difficult because I relate more in terms of the function, the work that you need to do, rather than the level you are at. For me, the difficult thing that I've seen in many organizations is these artificial divisions between different hierarchical roles and heights. So people who are managers will not talk or go to lunch, for example, with the secretaries, or the directors will not go with the managers. So that creates a lot of horizontal silos, which I would say are not really beneficial. And so that is probably one of the greatest challenges that I see in very large organizations.
Yes, as you say, we must not forget that we often confuse the country culture with the company culture, and effectively, as in this case you rightly point out, there are such characteristics that are common to this kind of institutions, and this is regardless of the culture of the country. And then you moved from being a manager in a large institution such as EBRD to being the CEO of your own company. What was the big challenge in it?
I think the big challenge is that I cover several functions. So I could say that vertical silos, horizontal silos have been really broken down. The organization is big in a certain sense, but small in another sense, that certain decisions need to fall under me, and decisions and strategic approach as well towards certain areas. So covering this required, of course, not just a lot of time to actually deal with the issues, but different skill sets as well. So if I'm looking at content for our clients, the content is very much technical because we work in climate change, environmental sustainability, degradation, etc. So it becomes quite technical. But then there are elements of having to comply with regulations and legislation from an employee perspective. So you have a whole sets of really directives that you need to follow. I have never done auditing or accounting, which like now I have to, even if I have an accountant, I have to understand deeply enough to be able to sign the papers. So, but you see, it's so much more fulfilling, exactly because ultimately, that, and it's entirely under your control and possibilities. So I feel that the relations between input and output efforts and then what I get is so much more explicit. Yeah.
Great. And so now you are the CEO of your company, Globalfield, born in 2018. You are now the one who sets the mark. So what's your leadership style? I mean, who do you want to be there?
Very early in my career, like you work and you go through management programs, for example, leadership programs. And very early on, and here we are talking about 20 years ago, 15 years ago, a lot of the women who were giving these talks were women who achieved really greatly. They were at president, vice president level, but not many had children. Now, 20 years later, the situation is very, very different. There are so many more mothers who are in higher positions, and it's so natural because there is not that feeling of, okay, this is me, this is my family, those are my children. Many women, and this is very much my approach as well, an approach of integration, take life as a whole, which doesn't mean mixing things and becoming really stressed out. It means that there are certain realities which complement each other. And so I find that for myself, but in so many other situations, I look like at many Silicon Valley companies, for example, women are really in a much better and higher position than to be 20 years ago. And this is a situation that I really appreciate. The fact that we can be more out there. There is nothing to hide. If we have children, maybe during calls we're arguing or they need lunch or dinner or breakfast because, well, that's the situation that we are in. So, this is really important. And what has happened is flexibility. I cannot talk for everyone, and I'm sure there are complex situations in very specific situations, but I would say that the concept of flexibility has improved. Work-life balance and understanding how to manage this has definitely increased. For me, flexibility is something that I received. It was very helpful, especially when the children were smaller, and it's something that I like to give. Also because it goes both ways. The other thing is diversity. I would say diversity in particular in our company now is at the level of what each one of us has, our knowledge, expertise, experience, skill sets. We need different people with different approaches. So that is very important as well, because it's complementary within a team or within a company.
Great. And if you had to identify a personal limitation in your leadership style or something that you would like to improve, what would it be?
You know, sometimes, but often, I don't like arguments. I don't like arguing. So I have often withdrawn from critical or difficult situations. So I would say that I would need to become better at distinguishing those situations where, okay, that's fine, let's leave it, to those situations where you need to push it a little bit more and then do it. So this would be probably one limitation, something, you know, work in progress, let's say.
Yeah, and this is often something that women feel, that they feel like they have to be more aggressive sometimes or more like men to impose themselves. Is this something that you have experienced too sometimes in your career?
Yes, you do get many people who are at higher level and they are quite forceful, aggressive. I like to make the distinction between doing things and having impact on the one hand and then being aggressive. I don't like to be aggressive. It just doesn't come. I don't think that you need to be aggressive in order to achieve. But I think I also need in myself and in my company to show that, you know, what I'm saying is true. Therefore, to be perhaps a little bit more forceful without being aggressive and then get the impact that I want. So as I was saying, I think this is still work in progress for me. There is still a few things that I need to do in order to be on track.
Yeah, everyone has to find his own leadership style and his own balance. And that's what, I mean, the fact of being authentic, it's what makes us more effective at the end. So, and then Marta, we have been introduced through a common friend who has been living here for a while and then is back in UK now. But in the past few weeks, we had a long conversation, you and me, about your interests and your company's goals. I know when I listen to you talking about your work, I can really feel the passion and the deep motivation that you put into it. And I know you are also a certified coach. So now the question I'm gonna ask you will not sound weird to you because you are a coach, but so what is the purpose? What is the purpose of life that you want to realize through your company, through Globalfield?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a big question. I want to be able to make an impact that is really contributing to minimizing the effect of climate change and environmental degradation. And I know that sounds like the mandate of a company, but I do really believe that a corporate level, a higher level, as well as at smaller level, our own individual contribution, for all of us, there is something to do. I also find that this is so much linked to so many other things that happen in my life, in terms of yoga, for example, in terms of meditation, in terms of some of the things that we do, like, for example, I'm vegetarian. I really believe in the union of things and finding the essence in nature, in trees, in our common social capital. So it's not just about, you know, the project, the action, the transaction. It's all a little bit wider. You know, we talk about yoga being union, and often the relation or the understanding from people is, you know, movements, and that is all fine. But there is something which is much, much deeper, which really goes into the essence and the soul of things and of nature. So for me, the understanding which I bring throughout life is the same understanding and the same approach that I have when I work. So the impact and doing something positive. And in some cases, it may be small, yeah? But small actions can have benefits, can have impacts. Just add them up.
So sustainability at 360 degrees, I would say it is a bit like your leitmotif, no? Sustainability in life, sustainability in work, sustainability in the environment. What advice would you give to women who are, like you, constantly looking for a sustainable balance between career and family life?
I would say, and I say this to myself as well, you know, right now, don't be too hard on yourself, in the sense that, yes, of course, you know, like we need to have ambitions and targets, but let's not use those to feel less than, or I should do this because I need to do this because. It's things that we can do that will help us integrate all different aspects of life. But it's important to take it with some lightness as well, so that we don't feel, you know, less than, because we are perfect. I would say we really need to accept, you know, a guru of mine I used to say, everything is perfect as is. And if we look at this a little bit more deeply, it's not just perfection, it's not the outside, is, you know, the way we approach and if we see those with beauty and gratitude, then that is the reflection, that is our interpretation, and that is what is going to help us, in particular women.
Great. Well, it was the conclusion for me with you and your guru. Great. Thanks, Marta, for your time and for your contribution, for your ideas. And I mean, today we talked about cross-cultural issues. Therefore, we talked about differences, but we talked also about elements that unite us, and such as the search of a sustainable balance between work and private life, and sustainability with respect to the environment. So these issues are, I would say, transversal to cultures, and they are common issues all over the world. Well, I hope you enjoyed the interview. You can comment and share it, and see you next month for a new appointment with the Cross-Cultural Leadership for Women series. And Marta, thank you very much for your time.
Erica, thank you for organizing this, and this was very, very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.